Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is the 52 Ways podcast. Happy Wednesday to you. This comes out on Wednesday afternoons, Christian.
Wednesday. Yep.
Wednesday.
Definitely Wednesday today.
Yes, it's definitely Wednesday. Well, it's not today, but it will be when they see this.
Yeah.
So happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope you're having a great week. And this is week 4 of 52 Ways. And so obviously week 4 out of 52
Yep.
means we're winding down the first month of the year. How's your January been?
Great.
That was really lame.
It was kind of just a COVID month.
It was kind of a COVID month. Yeah, we all, except for you.
Yeah.
All of us had it except for you.
I'm special.
That's twice now that the family had it and you didn't get it. He has some secret COVID immunity that the world is seeking, and it's right inside that body right there.
Yep.
You need to grab it out and share it with the world. Think we could do that?
No.
Okay.
I'd rather be alive than the rest of humanity be fine.
So excited to be back here. We've got really an important conversation to have, one that Christian and I, as we were prepping, got a little feisty just a minute ago. So we'll see how this goes, but just to share what we're doing here. So obviously, if you've watched one of these before, listened to one of these before, you know that we're trying to make a difference in the world by using the example that Jesus gave us, the way that he modeled how to treat each other, how to love each other. And we're going to look at each situation where he talked about how to treat each other, love each other, and then each situation where he actually did it. And we're going to try to learn from it, try to see what can we gather, what can we glean that'll help us to do what he told us to do, which is to love one another the way that he loved us. And in our world today, when there's not a lot of love going on, there's a whole lot of hate. The hope is that by studying this in a really intentional, methodical way throughout the year, that we'll get better at it. We can help our family and our friends, to get better at it by modeling it with them. And we can start to nudge other people that we come across and just make a little difference in our corner of the world. And heck, who knows, maybe make a big difference in the larger part of the world if this thing happens to be of value to people and a lot of people watch it or listen to it. And I'm hoping, Christian, did you know this? I'm hoping that as we go through the year and as we develop this content, I'm writing it all down as we go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that it becomes content that can be used in a book, content that can be used, to go.
I did not know this.
You did not know that?
No.
Oh, I thought I told you this.
No.
Yeah. So this is like a content development year where I think at the end of the year, I'm going to have a book. We're going to have a book that's called 52 Ways. 52 Ways to Love Like Jesus or something like that.
Is my name going to be very big like yours?
Heck
or
yeah.
is it going to be like, I remember seeing like Scott Milford and have like the tiny,
with Christian Milford. Stay close to the mic there.
Okay. Yeah.
But
so my name will be big.
It'll be big.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be equal billing.
Yes.
Maybe it depends on how much of it you write versus how much of it I write.
You mean just walk away right now? Because I can. I better get as big of
maybe your name will be
you.
smaller.
No.
Anyway, so it could be a book. I'm hoping it is, because one of the things that I really see, and Christian, I'm going to spring this on you. I would love throughout the year if people want me or want us to come and speak at your church, at your event, at your school.
What?
Maybe it's just me. You don't have to do it. I don't want to freak you out too much.
I didn't know about this.
Yeah, no, I know. This is more like part of, I guess, the thing that I've been thinking about. We haven't talked about it, but you don't have to go speak at places. I know that's not your thing at this point in your life, but if you have a place where this content would be helpful for your people, wherever your people are, give me a call. Shoot me an email.
Don't give me a call.
Don't call Christian. Message me on Facebook or Instagram, and let's talk about it. Because I would love to go out and, as time permits, go out and speak on this topic, and help more and more people hear what it is that we're doing here. Because hopefully, like I said, it'll be a meaningful experience for them to hear a lot of this.
You just told me just so many things. I was just.
We're
writing a book.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
cool.
I feel
and we're gonna go to churches and talk about this topic. Oh, okay.
Well, I never expected you to do that, but I just thought I'd throw it out there and see what your reaction was.
Yeah.
And now I know
my reaction.
So
stages besides me with a violin is not good.
Well, maybe we could have
maybe I could
talk.
just hold my violin.
Well, you could just be back there playing nice music, and then as I get louder and louder, you can play faster and faster.
Like a worship band guitars.
Yeah, right. Okay, so hey, this week we are going to dive in to, and when Christian heard what we were going to talk about, he went, "Oh no,
yep,
not this. This is hard." and he's got
Impossible,
lots,
actually.
impossible. Yeah, I would agree. And that's okay though. We're not asked to do it perfectly. I think we're
But that's the
just,
problem. It kind of seems like that we are in this
yeah, it kind of
verse.
does. But we're asked to try, and we're asked to model Jesus as much as we can, even though it's like we're destined to fail. But his perfection will cover our imperfection in the end, and that's what really grace is all about, as far as him dying for us. So anyway, we're talking about it like they know what we're talking about, and
No, they don't.
people don't know what we're talking about because we just now started talking about it. So here's the scripture. We're going to be looking at Matthew 5. We're still in the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, and we'll go through that until we're done, and then we'll hit Mark, and then we'll hit Luke, and then we'll hit John, and by then it'll be the end of the year. But Matthew 5, verses 21 through 32. And it gets into some hard stuff. I don't want to read the whole passage because it's long, but we'll just kind of introduce it here. So this is coming out of the Beatitudes, which we talked about last week, which we got into some really good stuff last week. Go back and listen to last week's. I think, last week we heard what Jesus, where his heart was with the things that will be blessed and honored by God. Is to be merciful and to be, peaceful, and to seek peace, and all those things that we talked about last time. It was really strong content.
Isn't this actually the Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah, this is all part of it.
Yeah.
And so he gets into this thing now where he raises the bar on some topics that the Jewish people have long felt like they understood in a pretty black and white way.
Very black and white.
And then Jesus comes along and says, yeah,
we're going to add a very, very large gray area that is impossible to define.
You think it's gray, or you think it's just like a higher bar?
It's
like he
gray.
Raised the level.
But he raised the bar, but wasn't very specific.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get into it and see. Maybe we can clear some of that up.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No.
Okay, so this is a teaching about anger. This is verse 21. It says, "You've heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say," and actually Pastor Jeff talked about the authority that Jesus preached with. I think this is a good example of it. He's not like relying on somebody else's authority. He's saying, based on my authority as God, I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. If you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. So it's not just a matter of killing somebody that makes you subject to the fires of hell. It's just being angry with them. It's cursing them. What was the other one? It's if you call somebody an idiot. How many times have you ever called somebody an idiot?
Even if sisters. Most probably in a joking way, but
yeah. Well, like, there's been times where
I haven't called them like an idiot, like you idiot.
You've said it.
I've said it.
I've said it about people. We've all said it about people.
Like just like in more of like a funny way. Like
I've even heard Christians, even when you're not saying it right to somebody's face, like I've heard Christians, people close to me say about the liberal Democrat world.
Yeah.
Those people are so stupid. They're idiots. Yeah. Why do they do the things they do? Like I've heard that said. And I think that falls into this just as if you're saying it to somebody in particular. If your heart is at a place where you feel like somebody or some group of people are idiots and you have this hatred towards them, I think that's what Jesus is talking about here.
So specifically, does it say idiots?
Yeah. Like, well, in this translation, it does.
Out loud or just in your
heart? It doesn't
heart?
say out loud. It just says if you call somebody an idiot.
I think that's out loud.
It doesn't say, but the person I'm thinking of said it out loud. It just wasn't in front of somebody.
Yeah. So like because there are certain times in the Bible where it says even if you think something. Yeah. And then there's other times that it says whether it's an external.
We're going to get into that in a minute when we talk about adultery.
But I'm just curious with right here, if I think in my mind that I'm going to say something like, for instance, the liberals are idiots. If I think that, from the translation from thinking it going out to like a more of an external source, such as me saying it to maybe you, which would the inside one be a sin?
I think it is. I think that's the whole point of this.
Yeah.
Is that this is a condition of the heart,
the mindset.
Yeah.
And that means that we can't judge other people based on internal sins that are changing to their external sins, if that makes any sense.
I don't get it.
Like a transition from an internal, I know that like what goes in comes out, but there's certain things, like for instance, like these verses, and they're going to be really hard because they're going to tell us to gouge out our eyes. They're just going to say we can't judge people because of their because of what it looks like they're doing, because their internal sins are what it really matters. Because we our internal sins are 10 times more than our external sins.
And that's what Jesus is. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that's the point Jesus is making. If you just base what something being a sin on whether or not you kill them or not, or as we hear in the next part about adultery, whether or not you actually commit adultery with a person, if that's the bar, that's a very low bar. I mean, how many of us have murdered somebody?
Nobody.
Not very many. How many of us committed adultery? A lot of people, but certainly not the majority of the people in the world.
Yeah. So again, like, I know this is kind of like a joke, but if you murder someone and you say, well, I didn't murder him, the weapon did, or something like that.
The gun did it, not me.
Where is the point where it is? So now God is like, okay, we're going to raise that bar exponentially and say, if you call someone an idiot, that is murder.
Yeah. And that's where, like, some people that talk about the law versus Jesus's law of love, and how some people say, well, the law of love is so fluffy and easy and whatever. The point here is that it's not. The law of love is way harder than the Mosaic law, the law that Moses gave, where, then it's about the 10 commandments. And there's lots of hard things about eating and, worshiping on this day and not that day, and what day you can work. And there's all these little things you can get caught up in. But Jesus is all about, what is the condition of your heart? And he is raising the bar here big time. And in his teaching, this is the whole, like, how you treat other people. That's what the whole point of this podcast is. And he's telling us here that when you have some sort of negative contempt or negative something for somebody, that's sin. And that is not the way that he wants us to treat one another. Now, let's move on, because I know that, this could be like an hour-long podcast. Such a big topic here today. So in verse 25, right after he says all this, he says, back in 23, he says, so if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that somebody has something against you, and the idea here is that you've wronged them in some way, it says, leave your sacrifice at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. So what is he saying here, Christian?
So we talked about this a little bit earlier, and that's kind of when we didn't get mad at each other. We were just kind of butting heads a little bit, I guess. So first we have to compare Old Testament to New Testament terms. So, like, the first one is, they talked about bringing like a sacrifice to the altar, and well, we don't do that nowadays. So we were, okay, what's the New Testament type of relation to bringing something to the altar? And what we decided is prayer, right? And not,
well, as an example, it could be just going before God.
But that's prayer.
It's prayer. It's typically prayer of some sort.
So so first we decided that it's prayer. At first we thought it was maybe like becoming a Christian, but then we realized that prayer is just seems more of a logical answer.
I think this really assumes that you're already pursuing God.
You're
already
so that's why we said that prayer is a better one after you're a Christian. So I forgot what I was about to say.
Well, so kind of making it apples to apples, Old Testament to New Testament. So then what does that mean? When does that mean that you can't pray?
Oh, yeah. So we talked about this. So what we concluded, and I know this sounds very crazy, that God says, don't pray to me, don't talk to me, right? It's almost like compared to if Dad said, don't talk to me until everything is right with everyone that you know. Like, that's insane.
Well, and I think the point is, God, if you go to God and say, God, I love you, I love you, I love you, but yet he knows that you've just called 4 different people an idiot, he's going to say, wait, how can you tell me you love me when you have just insulted and shown hatred to these 4 other children of mine? Christian, if you just were the meanest brother ever to your sisters, and you came up to me, you're like, hey, Dad, you're the best dad ever, let's go hang out. I'm like,
taught me well.
No, you got to go figure stuff out with your sisters before I'm ready to talk to you. And that's really what God is saying here. And that gets to this idea, that, we the phrase in Christianity, love God and love others, love
Yeah.
God and love people. And a lot of people really put the emphasis first and like as the biggest emphasis on loving God, which makes sense. And Old Testament wise, that was the deal. But Jesus came along and said, oh, but there's one more, and it's equally as important: love one another. And so what he's saying here is they are equal, and you really can't do one without doing the other.
Mhm.
You can't love God truly and have him receive that in the right way if you are hating on people. And if you love God, you will love people. And if you love people, if you love his people, then that's a way of showing that you love him.
Yeah, and one of the technicalities that I brought up before the podcast is they talked about whether the person is mad at you or whether it specifically said you wronged them. Because if somebody's mad at you and to your best ability you did not do anything like wrong to them, if you've not wronged them and they're mad at you, I don't know, what's an example of someone you did something right and they got
Or if
mad
there's
at
a
you for it?
misunderstanding, like somebody, like, remember my story about the treadmill that I sold to that old guy? It's a good
No,
example.
I don't.
Yeah, you probably have heard it. I
Probably.
tell a lot of stories, but basically in 10 seconds or less, I sold a treadmill when I worked at a fitness store to an old guy who needed one. I brought it down to our cost. I delivered it for free. I did all this stuff to bend over backwards to make it affordable for this guy. And then his son called me and reamed me out for taking advantage of his elderly father, even though I had done everything. I even got in trouble by my boss for selling it so cheap. But they accused me of taking advantage of this old guy. So that was a misunderstanding where, yeah, that guy, the son, had something against me, but it was a total misunderstanding because I had tried to do the right
Did
thing.
you try to explain it to?
I did, but
to
he
the-
wasn't having it. He
so
thought I
yeah,
was lying.
so that's an example right there where my dad, for instance, did not do anything that was wrong,
Right.
and or did not wrong someone or did not call anyone an idiot.
So I think the
compare
point here
things.
is the time that you should leave your sacrifice at the altar and go make up with your brother or your neighbor is when you've done something to wrong somebody.
Yes.
And so in order for you to really come to God in prayer, really come to God in worship, he's saying you got to be right with the people around you in order to come to me and have me receive you in the way that you want me to receive you. And so there's so much to learn from that. And because I think people do this a lot where like they've got family relationships that are strained, or they've got relationships with their friends or their coworkers where there's just a lot of animosity and a lot of negative stuff going on. But yet they go to church and boy, they're raising their hands and they're singing out to Jesus and I love you, Jesus. But yet they're not willing to go make up those relationships or fix those relationships. And that's hard to fix, those relationships, isn't it, Christian?
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It is.
Because it requires so much humility and it requires so much just willingness to fall at somebody's feet and say, I'm sorry, and I want to make this right. And that's hard to do. But Jesus is teaching here. He says that's what you got to do. That's the way to do it. Okay. So let's keep on going here. So when he gets into adultery, there's probably not a whole lot more here. It's really the same concept. Well, he gets into the thing where it says, if you do sin, if you do lust after somebody, gouge out your eye. It's better to lose one part of your body than to have your whole body thrown into hell.
This brings up another point that I would like to talk about.
Oh, do we have time?
Maybe.
Do we want to go there?
Long story short, don't kill yourself to not sin, right? I thought about this, and I know this sounds crazy, but if let's just say someone committed suicide with their train of logic, they said, I know I'm going to, this is like just a thought process. I think about these weird things. A train of thought of someone's mind, right, is if I commit suicide, I will not sin anymore. God calls us to not sin. And therefore, I know that committing suicide is sin, but if I just sin one more time in order to stop sinning at all, right?
Okay.
I know it sounds like a crazy point, but in my mind, it was valid at first. So
it kind of ties in here the idea if you need to gouge out an eye to keep it from looking lustfully, then do it.
Yeah. So basically, I was kind of going on that logic train, and I said, okay, let's take that a step further and say, if I commit suicide, I would never sin again except for that final sin. But but we're not supposed to do that, of course. So basically, I brought a super high standard that I just made, and I said God doesn't want us to do this, to say that we're not supposed to take this thing to the extreme. There is some kind of like line that we should not cross in order to. There's some kind of line that we should not cross in order to.
Well, I
Yeah.
get where you're going.
Yeah.
Let me bring this idea in, and I'll probably bring this up several times over the next year that we're doing all this. But if you spend all of your time trying to focus on sinning less,
Mhm.
to some degree, you might have some success. Like you might sin a little less.
Mhm.
It's kind of like if you spend all your time trying to focus on not eating foods that are bad for you, you'll do that off and on. Like you'll
Mhm.
have good weeks and bad weeks and all that. But if you could instead spend your time focused on how you can love more,
Mhm.
then by default, you're going to be sinning less because you're not going to have enough time to do all the negative things if you're
Yeah.
focused on doing the positive things. So instead of like
I would
making
disagree.
all your decisions on what do I got to do to not sin as much, just focus on the things that he says to focus on, which is
Yeah.
loving each other, like the Good Samaritan story, which we'll get into down the road. But loving one another, loving your neighbor. If you can focus on that, you're going to sin less. And you said you disagree with that.
To a certain level, I do. I think there are certain things that are sinful to your own heart that does not matter whether you love other people externally.
Like what?
I don't know, just certain things. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
like just
You're probably right. I get
internal
that.
things that maybe like
Well, but
calling yourself, I don't know, like
you can treat yourself though as another person.
yeah, but
So sin,
yeah,
listen, sin can be against another person or it can be against yourself.
yeah.
Like there's a lot of things we do that are sinful, and the person that we're hurting is ourself.
Hmm.
Sin is not always hurting somebody else. It's also when we do things that hurt ourselves.
Yeah. So if we're talking about ourselves also, then yeah, I would
Okay.
agree with you.
Well, and that's the another thing I said to Christian before we started. I heard it in a sermon just this week, Andy Stanley's sermon this week, where he said when you look at the way that Jesus taught about sin, it's really pretty simple. And Christian said, "Oh, it's not that
I
simple,"
disagree with it.
but it's really pretty simple. Sin is pretty much anything that hurts somebody else or hurts yourself.
Well, we did
That's
not
sin.
add that into last.
Oh, we
Whenever you
didn't.
said
Okay,
that,
that
you
was the
said
self.
anybody else.
Got it.
But
Okay.
what was the?
But he said
What did
or
I say?
yourself.
I said something else.
Like if you lie to somebody to protect them.
Yeah, like there's so many fine lines
There's
that are
some
impossible
nuances.
to define.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's not worry about those nuances for now. But the concept, though, is that if you want to know, like, is it a sin if I do this? Well, ask yourself the question, is it going to hurt somebody or is it going to hurt you in the long run or even in the short run? And if the answer is yes, well, then it's probably a sin. Sin, I can't think of one single sin that doesn't hurt somebody. And I've thought about this.
Lying to save someone.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to me, that's a nuance. I mean, like, you know,
But okay, well,
punching
you just said I
somebody.
couldn't think of anything, and I just
Yeah,
thought
no,
of
I get it.
something.
I mean, I get.
And if you just call it a nuance, then you can do that with anything.
Yeah, lying to help someone, is it a sin then if you're helping them, not hurting them?
But God doesn't say don't lie to hurt someone.
Yeah,
He
I
said
know.
don't lie.
I know,
So,
but I feel like that's a layer down from what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like just at the surface.
well,
Is there a sin?
no, there's not. There's nothing.
That is-
There's going to be nothing that stops anything else at the surface. And
Well, no. Here's the thing. Like we think about sin as being right and wrong, right? Like sin is if it's sinful, it's wrong. If it's not sinful, then maybe it's right. And on that definition, we're not even bringing in the idea of the impact that it has on somebody else. But if we do bring in the idea that sin really is something against somebody else or against yourself, is there if you acknowledge that that's part of what sin is there even a sin that you can think of that doesn't hurt somebody? And I, like, you know, if you lie,
Lying.
if you cheat, if you steal, you're lying to somebody, you're cheating somebody, you're stealing from somebody.
but God still said don't do it.
Oh, I know. That's my point. But I'm just saying, I don't know. Well, we're running long. This meeting will end in 10 minutes, it said.
Oh no.
Which we're fine. We're not going to go 10 more minutes. But yeah, every sin has an impact to somebody else or yourself. And I don't think most people have fully processed that is a reality about sin. It does. So that's what Jesus is really talking about here. It's not just about killing people. It's about being angry. It's not just about actually committing adultery. It's about looking lustfully at a woman. And then he talks about divorce, and it says it's not just as simple as giving somebody divorce papers. Now says, but I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. So if you divorce your wife just because you're tired of your wife, you are then forcing adultery on her. And any man that marries her then is committing adultery by marrying her. And that's huge.
Whoa.
Yeah. Read your Bible.
I need to start reading my Bible.
You've read it a lot, I know. But
Wait,
yeah, but that's
are
it.
you serious?
Yeah.
So something that the wife did not do at all.
Yeah. Yeah. The last
Okay.
statement there says anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. So, because let me back up. It says, but if I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless it's she's been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery, and the person that marries her is committing
So
adultery.
is the woman in that situation wrong at all?
Boy, that's a I don't know.
That-
It
is
says
that
that she committed adultery.
oh, it says that she
Well,
but is
I
she
understand that to mean once she remarries, she commits adultery because then she's like
oh, I
committing
thought you
adultery
meant she's not
against.
allowed to marry again because
Well,
her husband divorced her.
but that is what it's saying. Unless she's willing to commit adultery, she's not allowed to marry again. It's I know I don't let's not go too far there because that's
Okay.
huge. That's where you get into some of different churches and their
Old
different
Testament,
views.
there's
Well, no, this
I
is
won't get into
Jesus's
this too
teaching.
much, but no, but Old Testament there was people were being stubborn, and that's what God said. Because you're stubborn, I will say that
Yeah.
if there was some kind of scenario that you could divorce your wife because, and that's something that I've thought about a lot. I'll make this really short, but God changed morality, and I never
That whole
knew
topic.
an instance. I thought, okay, I had a theory that that morality never changed, right? But God changed it completely for this group of people, or the Israelites, and said, and I think it's two instances where He did it, but one of them was marriage and whether you could divorce your wife. So God changed. There was one period of time where it was a morally wrong thing to divorce your wife under a certain circumstance, but then the next moment it was not morally wrong to do that, and that blew my mind. I had no clue that that was a thing. Like,
Yeah.
I
Well, and
actually I forgot about that, and I need to rethink that
and I
through.
would say that the reason that the only reason that God would do that is because there was a people reason, a people justification to do that. And it was because of the situation with the Israelites that caused him to do that. I don't remember all the details of it either, but again, God's putting the way that things impact people ahead of this idea of an absolute, black and white morality.
Yeah,
Okay, let's move on. This again,
yeah,
too much to cover here, but let's kind of let's try to wrap this up. Um, let's see a couple of notes that I wrote here. Jesus knows that hurting others, lust, hate, etc., impacts our hearts and takes us away from how close we are to Him. So focusing more on loving others, not sinning less. So yeah, we've kind of covered a lot of that.
yeah,
So the lesson that we can take away from this um, is trying to get your heart in a place where you recognize the value on having relationships right with one another, and that you don't sort of over spiritualize things and say, well, I'm just going to focus on loving God and I'm going to forget about this idea of loving people. What he's telling us here is that don't work. That don't fly. You have to do both. If you truly love God, then you will love his children and you will prioritize treating them the way that he has treated us. The fruits of the spirit, we got to get into that.
mm-hmm.
Kind of, this fruits of the spirit thing. I'd be curious, how if we continue to add that into this, because it feels like it might get a little redundant.
Yeah. I
I
thought
love
about
the
that.
concept, but I chose goodness, self-control, and kindness. I think it's good to bring the fruits of the spirit into the conversation. Probably not a whole lot of additional discussion needed there,
Yeah,
but if we are doing this, if we are raising the level of priority that we put on spending, making sure our relationships are right with people,
definitely
goodness,
self-control.
self-control, kindness, that all plays in.
Yeah,
So these are ways the Holy Spirit equips us to love one another the way that Jesus loved us. Um, yeah. So as far as how to apply this, and we'll just go one more minute, then we got to roll because I got to actually.
Don't call anyone an idiot.
Don't call anybody an idiot, and
Not even liberals or
yeah,
anybody that you hate.
yeah, that's right. I mean, whether it be politicians that you don't like,
I'm
or
not
whether
being
it be
sarcastic right now.
what's that?
I'm
Yeah.
not being sarcastic
Yeah, I
right
know.
now.
Yeah, but it's so tempting to do that. But if you do that and then you go to church and you look like the holiest person there because of the way you're raising your hands and singing loud and everything else, God's telling us that's not how to do it. So go make it right with your neighbor, your family member, whatever, before you think you've got everything all figured out. And Christians, I'm speaking right at you because we don't have this figured out. We feel justified in our anger towards people based on their positions on social issues, based on their positions on things that we think are reprehensible. God is saying we are not justified in our anger to the point where we can just hang on to it and we can call them idiots. He's telling us that is wrong. So,
Whoa.
There's the bell.
Yep.
We'll see you next week, everybody. We love you. Christian, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was.
We'll see you next week. Be well, my friend.